Ladies and gentlemen, the session will be start in the next 5 minutes. We would love to invite our wonderful delegate to come to the hall to get ready for the session. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin. Please be seated and switch your mobile phone to silent mode. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, 26 October 2023, in Hanoi, we welcome all the delegates attending today's event, the Business Roundtable, and the Public-Private Policy Dialogue session on sustainable investment. The event is being organized by Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, Business at OECD, Asian Business Advisory Council, and Vietnam Chamber of Commerce, Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry, VCCI. Joining our event today, we would like to proudly introduce and invite our key speaker to the stage, Mr. Phạm Tấn Công, Chairman and President of Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry, VCCI. Agdino Vega, co-chair of the OECD Southeast Asia Business Network, alternate chair of Asian Park 2023 Indonesia. And Mr. Philip O'Reilly, co-chair of OECD Southeast Asia Business Network, former chair of business at OECD New Zealand, as well as numerous businesses, news agents, and related parties. On behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to express sincere thanks to your participation. To begin with, we would like to invite Mr. Phạm Tấn Công, Chairman and President of VCCI, to deliver opening remark. Mr. Công, please.
Hello. Okay. Thưa quý vị lãnh đạo đại diện các cơ quan, tổ chức, doanh nghiệp và thưa toàn thể các quý vị khách quý. Thay mặt cho cộng đồng doanh nghiệp Việt Nam và VCCI, tôi xin trân trọng gửi lời chào mừng nhiệt liệt đến quý vị khách quý có mặt tại sự kiện tọa đàm bàn tròn doanh nghiệp và đối thoại chính sách công tư về đầu tư bền vững bên lề hội nghị Bộ trưởng OECD Đông Nam Á 2023 được tổ chức tại Hà Nội. Tôi vui mừng và đánh giá cao sự tham dự đông đảo của các quý vị đại diện các tổ chức, doanh nghiệp tiêu biểu của OECD và khu vực Đông Nam Á cùng có mặt ở đây để chia sẻ về tầm nhìn, nhận diện những thời cơ, thách thức cũng như trao đổi về các nỗ lực hành động vì một mục tiêu chung là sự phát triển thịnh vượng và bền vững của khu vực. Tôi tin tưởng rằng cuộc tọa đàm ngày hôm nay sẽ giúp chúng ta nhận diện và định hình những xu hướng, cơ hội hợp tác đầu tư bền vững, cân bằng giữa mục tiêu tăng trưởng, lợi nhuận với mục tiêu giảm thiểu tác động khí hậu, bảo vệ tài nguyên thiên nhiên của khu vực Đông Nam Á và OECD. Từ đó sẽ giúp hình thành, hoạch định các công cụ, chính sách để thu hút đầu tư bền vững vào khu vực. Thưa các quý vị, có thể thấy tình hình thế giới hiện nay đang thay đổi nhanh chóng, phức tạp với nhiều biến động chưa từng có. Sự nóng lên của trái đất, biến đổi khí hậu đã kéo theo những tác động tiêu cực vô cùng lớn đến sự phát triển và sinh tồn của hành tinh này. Các hành động khí hậu đã trở thành định hướng trong chiến lược phát triển của mỗi quốc gia, khu vực. Mỗi quốc gia, mỗi tổ chức, doanh nghiệp đều có trách nhiệm và phải nỗ lực hành động để hài hòa giữa tăng trưởng kinh tế, gia tăng tiêu thụ năng lượng và giảm thiểu phát thải khí nhà kính. Trong bối cảnh đó, thu hút đầu tư bền vững là một trong những mục tiêu quan trọng có ảnh hưởng lớn quyết định sự phát triển của mỗi quốc gia, nhất là đối với các nước Đông Nam Á. Tọa đàm ngày hôm nay sẽ là giúp chúng ta học hỏi từ những bài học thực tiễn tốt nhất từ các nghiên cứu của OECD, từ công nghệ cao của các nước tiên tiến trong lĩnh vực phát triển kinh tế xanh và thu hút đầu tư bền vững. Báo cáo gần đây của Bain & Company với tiêu đề Nền kinh tế xanh Đông Nam Á 2023 cũng đã chỉ ra tiềm năng to lớn về phát triển bền vững, là minh chứng cho cam kết chung của chúng ta nhằm thúc đẩy một tương lai xanh, bao trùm và thịnh vượng cho Đông Nam Á. Thưa các quý vị đại biểu, tăng trưởng xanh, phát triển kinh tế tuần hoàn, thực hiện mục tiêu phát thải bằng không vào năm 2050 là định hướng ưu tiên phát triển của Việt Nam trong thời gian tới. Phương châm của chúng tôi là quá trình chuyển đổi xanh cần được thực hiện một cách cân bằng, công bằng, hài hòa, hợp lý, đặt người dân làm trọng tâm, đóng góp cho một thế giới tương lai hòa bình, bền vững và thịnh vượng. Trọng tâm của quá trình là hoàn thiện khung khổ pháp lý cho tăng trưởng xanh, chuyển đổi số, đẩy nhanh chuyển đổi năng lượng. Ngay sau hội nghị COP26, Việt Nam đã ban hành hàng loạt các kế hoạch để nhanh chóng chuyển thực hiện cam kết, quyết tâm của chúng tôi thành lộ trình cụ thể, bao gồm những như kế hoạch triển khai thực hiện các cam kết, chiến lược quốc gia về biến đổi khí hậu, kế hoạch hành động quốc gia về tăng trưởng xanh, kế hoạch hành động giảm thải khí metan, chương trình hành động về chuyển đổi năng lượng xanh, giảm phát thải khí carbon và khí metan trong ngành giao thông vận tải, chương trình phát triển lâm nghiệp bền vững. Việt Nam trở thành một trong 3 quốc gia đang phát triển đầu tiên trên thế giới đã tham gia quan hệ đối tác chuyển đổi năng lượng công bằng cùng với nhóm các đối tác quốc tế với những mục tiêu rất tham vọng về giảm thải phát thải nhà kính, phát triển năng lượng tái tạo để thay thế nhiệt điện than. Dự kiến kế hoạch huy động nguồn vốn để thực hiện GETP sẽ được Việt Nam và các đối tác quốc tế hoàn tất và công bố tại COP28 vào cuối năm nay. Thưa các quý vị đại biểu, Việt Nam luôn coi trọng và khuyến khích thúc đẩy đầu tư bền vững. Tôi mong rằng tại tọa đàm ngày hôm nay, chúng ta sẽ có cuộc đối thoại cởi mở và hiệu quả để cùng nhau khai thác các nỗ lực hợp tác công tư, đóng vai trò là chất xúc tác cho hành động chuyển đổi và sẽ tăng cường hơn nữa mối quan hệ giữa các quốc gia phát triển công nghệ cao của OECD và khu vực Đông Nam Á trẻ trung năng động. Cùng nhau hợp tác hành động, chúng ta sẽ xây dựng nên sự phát triển thịnh vượng, bền vững và hạnh phúc. Với niềm tin sâu sắc đó, tôi xin khai mạc tọa đàm và một lần nữa tôi xin gửi lời chúc sức khỏe và thành công đến tất cả các quý vị đại biểu có mặt tại sự kiện ngày hôm nay. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Phạm Tấn Công. Next, we would like to cordially invite Park Dino Vega, co-chair of OECDC Business Network and alternate chair of Asian Park 2023, come to the stage.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is my first OECD event, so I was a bit apprehensive to see what kind of audience, and I'm quite happy to see I see some familiar faces. So good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and allow me just to express a heartfelt gratitude to OECD, the business at OECD or BIAC, as well as the Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry for organizing this esteemed event. It is indeed an honor to be here and stand here before you today to talk about the ever-increasing significance of sustainable investment in the ASEAN region, as well as the pivotal role the ASEAN Business Advisory Council has taken in this vital cause. So the ASEAN region undeniably has become sort of like a powerhouse of economic growth over these last few decades. It's been a center of growth in midst of global uncertainty. But yet with this growth comes a heightened responsibility, a responsibility to address the pressing and challenges of today, which is environmental sustainability and social equity, as well as governance excellence. So the balance between environmental sustainability and social equity is what we think is the biggest challenge that we face in this region today. Sustainable investment is no longer just a common term. It now has become part of the business vocabulary in the region. And I believe this will be something that the ASEAN BAC will put as its vital core in developing and moving ahead. And the importance of sustainable development and investment in ASEAN is critical. It lies into the potential to foster economic growth while simultaneously safeguarding our environment, promoting social inclusivity, and adhering to robust governance. So that, again, that balance. Sustainable development encompasses a diverse array of opportunities, which includes, and we've discussed this over the last couple of years, renewable energy, green infrastructure, responsible agriculture, and there are still more discussions on sustainable development. Investments not only steer us towards a more balanced and resilient economy, but it also contributes significantly to attain the UN goals on sustainable development goals. Today, we have an MOU signing with the business at OECD. This collaboration is paramount, I believe, in the context of ASEAN BAC. It's paramount because it fosters global cooperation among businesses between our two entities and two regions. The MOU will establish a platform for ASEAN and OECD member countries to share best practices, expertise, and insights on sustainable investment. I think it's right now it's doing so, but we can actually integrate this even more. It encourages the exchange of knowledge and ideas that can help business transcend borders and global standards and achieve common standards. The collaboration can focus on several issues, which the discourse was taken up during the last ASEAN summit. That includes promoting trade investment, supporting SME development, encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship, given the young population in ASEAN, as well as addressing climate change and environmental challenges. This collaboration amplifies the voice of the business community in the region in advocating for responsible and sustainable investment practices, therefore reinforcing regional resilience. So as we gaze in the future, let us remember that our collective efforts, coupled with collaboration among business worldwide and an unwavering adherence to sustainability principles, are the keys to build a better and more equitable future, an environmentally responsible world for generations to come. And we together have the power to lead the transformation towards a more sustainable and prosperous ASEAN and a better world. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to a very productive and fruitful dialogue today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bác Dino Vega. Ladies and gentlemen, following up, please kindly welcome Mr. Phil O'Reilly, the co-chair of OECDC Business Network and former chair of business at OECD. Come to the stage.
Good morning. Honourable Ministers, distinguished colleagues from ASEAN, especially our friends from Vietnam, of course, and Indonesia, esteemed friends of BIAC, and I extend warm greetings to you all. And as I say, it's just fantastic to be back in Hanoi and see the growth that's going on in Southeast Asia. I'm Phil O'Reilly. I have the privilege of serving as the co-chair of the OECD Southeast Asia Business Network, with a representative, of course, from ASEAN BAC you've just heard from. I'm also former chair of business at OECD and the chair of the BIAC Southeast Asia Contact Group. I want to express my gratitude, my profound gratitude for the opportunity to address you at this highly significant business event on the side of the OECD Southeast Asia Ministerial Forum, which will commence this afternoon. Last year in Hanoi at this very forum, we highlighted the OECD's growing involvement in Southeast Asia. This year, I'm pleased to note that this involvement has been significantly amplified, and you've heard about that already today. Concrete examples include the ministerial forum attended by the OECD Secretary General Matthias Cormann, both last year and this year, which will be held here, of course, as well as the OECD Strategic Framework for the Indo-Pacific launched this year. And the framework aims to strengthen engagement with the region, promoting shared standards and identifying Indo-Pacific countries for potential OECD membership in the years ahead. As we gather here today, we're all acutely aware, of course, that the global community faces many difficult challenges, ranging from the pressing need to overcome the complexities of navigating digital transformation to the imperative of mitigating the impacts of climate change. The critical need for international investment in those areas, of course, then is more urgent than ever. I find it incredibly heartening, therefore, that this year's Ministerial Forum is centered around the theme sustainable and quality investment. Investment is not merely timely in the current geopolitical landscape, it's absolutely essential. Investment undoubtedly serves as the cornerstone for our collective and coordinated endeavours in this strategically important region. We've seen a rising commitment by Southeast Asia to sustainable growth and economic integration, exemplified by Indonesia's expressed interest in joining the OECD. One of the best emails I received all year was that email telling me that had happened. Brilliant news. The strengthening of relations between Southeast Asian countries and OECD nations, therefore, should be further advanced as it serves the mutual interests of both parties. A word about BIAC, the organisation I represent here, and its activities and initiatives. We steadfastly advocate for policies that not only foster economic growth, but also contribute to sustainable development and societal prosperity. Through BIAC, national businesses and employers organisations representing over 9 million companies globally provide invaluable perspectives to shape market-based economies and uphold a global level playing field. Last year, a significant milestone for BIAC was the relaunch of the OECD Southeast Asian Business Network, together with the OECD and ASEAN Business Advisory Council, ASEAN BAC, as you've just heard from, and the establishment of the BIAC Southeast Asia Contact Group, which I have the honour of chairing. These initiatives align with the OECD's newly launched strategic framework for the Indo-Pacific, underscoring everybody's focus on this region as a top priority. Concurrent with that increased focus on Southeast Asia, we've also intensified our regional engagement. Today at the Ministerial Forum and related events, we'll be delighted to cooperate with ASEAN BAC in two significant ways. Firstly, I'm pleased to announce that BIAC and the ASEAN BAC will be including an MOU during the Southeast Asian Ministerial Forum. This agreement not only reinforces the burgeoning partnership between the two organisations, but also delineates the framework for future collaboration. These endeavours are fundamentally aimed at catalysing international investment initiatives for sustainable growth in this strategically vital region and the OECD member states. Secondly, an essential pillar of this fortified relationship is the joint business statement on international investment for sustainable growth. Here it is. We'll be launching that later on this afternoon. I'm sure there'll be copies of it available for you. Have a read of it. It's our joint view on the priorities that we should all be focusing on over the coming period in terms of international investment. It encompasses 10 pivotal business recommendations tailored to address the complex tapestry of challenges and opportunities that the global community and ASEAN nations both face. These recommendations offer a roadmap for the nexus of investment and sustainable growth, focusing on areas such as fostering innovation, investment and supply chain resilience, promoting sustainable business practices and green transition, ensuring competitive and regulatory coherence, empowering the region's business entities and small and medium enterprises, and strengthening public-private partnerships. The statement serves as a crucial guide for policymakers, highlighting the private sector's indispensable role in addressing both the challenges and opportunities of sustainable investment. As we look ahead, dear colleagues, I wish to reiterate BAC's unwavering commitment to strengthening engagement in Southeast Asia. As federations of businesses, BAC and ASEAN BAC have an established cooperative relationship that has been further enhanced by the MOU we're concluding today. That relationship will undoubtedly be instrumental in amplifying our collective efforts to foster international investment for sustainable growth in the region. I also extend an invitation to the business and employers organisations in Southeast Asia to consider becoming observers of BAC. The Singapore Business Federation, who I just caught up with a day or two ago, and the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, KADIN, have already joined us as observers from the region, gaining access to OECD discussions through the BAC policy framework in a world where the influence of OECD discussions on global rulemaking is ever increasing, everything from international taxation, AI principles, and many other things. So as we proceed, let us carry forward the spirit of partnership and collaboration that's been the hallmark of our interactions before today, and tomorrow. I look forward to the substantive discussions and partnerships that will undoubtedly emerge from today's gathering. Thank you once again for the privilege of addressing you. I extend my best wishes for fruitful discussions and meaningful partnerships in the days to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. And we appreciate all our three speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for our distinguished speaker of OECD Southeast Asia Business Network. Ladies and gentlemen, our meeting today marks a historic moment where the ASEAN Business Advisory Council and business at OECD will sign a memorandum of understanding MOU to enhance collaboration in the region. To begin the signing ceremony, we would like to welcome Mr. Charles Rick Johnston, Chair of Business at OECD, to join us virtually for signing. Now, Mr. Johnston would like to deliver a small speech. Please, Mr. Johnston.
Thank you, sir, and good morning. I'm going to hope that the audio is working in this presentation. My name is Rick Johnston. I serve as the Chair of Business at OECD, or otherwise known as BAC, the official business voice to the OECD. I also serve as the Managing Director of Citibank Global Government Affairs here in Washington, D.C. We're delighted to coordinate business input to the OECD Southeast Asia Ministerial Forum together with ASEAN BAC. Southeast Asia stands at a critical juncture, grappling with the dual challenges of scaling up clean energy technologies and bridging an ever-widening infrastructure investment gap. Addressing these issues will require a huge investment. Against this backdrop, the importance of mobilizing private capital becomes indisputable. While the environment presents complexities and uncertainties, it is imperative to acknowledge that capital mobilization is not yet at the level it could be. The private sector, despite possessing the necessary financial resources, has been hesitant to commit. This stems from the absence of a de-risked investment landscape, a challenge that governments and multilateral development banks must tackle urgently. It is here that the recommendations from business at OECD and ASEAN BAC offer invaluable insights. We must foster a regulatory environment that is not only stable and transparent, but also adaptable to the rapid changes we see in the global stage. We need strategies that don't just exist on paper, but are robustly implemented. We cannot afford to have static recommendations. They must evolve to stay relevant, calling for regular stakeholder consultations and reviews. Regular stakeholder consultations and reviews. We must also recognize that sustainability is not a zero-sum endeavor. Investments in renewable technologies should be complemented by increasing energy efficiency across sectors and investments in human capital, cultivating the skills necessary for effective management. Only a holistic approach where public and private sectors collaborate seamlessly can yield resilient, inclusive, and sustainable economies. As a representative of the real economy, we cannot emphasize enough the urgency of this moment. Business at OECD stands ready to collaborate, to bring our resources, expertise, and insights to the table. However, we look to governments to set the stage with a regulatory framework conducive to large-scale, de-risked investments. The challenges we face are too monumental for any single sector to address. They demand immediate, collective action. Together, we can steer the course toward not only economic prosperity, but also a future that is sustainable and conclusive for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. Now we would like to invite Park Ino Vega come to the signing table. And we also respectfully invite Mr. Phạm Tấn Công, Mr. Phil O'Reilly come to the stage and witness the signing ceremony. We also would like to invite Mr. Nguyễn Quang Vinh, Vice Executive Chairman of VCCI and also Chairman of Asian Park Vietnam, come to the stage. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please give more round of applause for the success of MOU signing ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are preparing for the next session, we would like to show some footage about the investment promotion. Please look on the screen to watch the video. Thank you very much.
Vietnam, the third largest economy in Southeast Asia, with a GDP of over 400 billion US dollars, is among the world's top 20 FDI destinations and top 20 international traders. The country, with the success story in development path and foreign investment attraction in the past 35 years, is transforming into an attractive and safe destination, a dynamic and potential market, a destination for investors' success. Vietnam is one of the few economies with positive growth during the COVID-19 pandemic period. Last year, Vietnam's GDP reached a record growth rate of 8.02%. FDI attraction surpassed 29 billion US dollars, with actual invested capital of over 22 billion US dollars a 13% year-on-year increase. Trade volume stood at $732 billion US, up by 9%. In the first half of 2023, greenfield investment in Vietnam increased by nearly 72%, with newly registered capital rose by 31% over the same period last year. With the ambitious commitment of net zero carbon emission target by 2050, Vietnam is effectively implementing the national green growth strategy, boosting economic restructuring with regards to new growth innovation models, environment-friendly, social fairness, and sustainable development. The potential for cooperation in green growth, digital economy, circular economy, knowledge economy, science and technology, and innovation is rapidly expanding. Vietnam, with its strategic geographical position, is located in the heart of Southeast Asia, a dynamic development region. It only takes 1 to 5 hours to fly from Hanoi, the capital city, or Ho Chi Minh City, the nation's economic hub, to Bangkok, Singapore, Beijing, Seoul, Tokyo. Social, political, and macroeconomic stability are well maintained. The economy, with 100 million people, has steadily grown at 6 to 7% in the past 2 decades. Rising global status. Vietnam has strategic partnerships with 17 countries, including big ones within G7 and G20. Previously, the country well performed the role of ASEAN Chair, the 41st ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, IPA President in 2020, and non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for the 2020-2021 term. Dynamic economic reform. For deeper integration into the global value and supply chains, Vietnam is accelerating its institutional reform, improving its business environment and national competitiveness. During the 2016-2020 period, Vietnam's business environment ranking, according to the World Bank, increased by 20 places. The country is one of the 2 Asian countries with long-term credit ratings at stable and positive, according to Moody's and S&P. Nikkei Asia assessed Vietnam has been leading Southeast Asia in terms of recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic and ranked 8th in the world. The country's happiness index also increased by 12 ranks from 77 in 2022 to 65 in 2023.
The program will be followed by a roundtable discussion on sustainable investment. We are pleased to introduce and invite the moderator to the stage, Mr. Nguyễn Quang Vinh, Vice Executive Chairman of VCCI, Chairman of Asian Bank Vietnam, who will be coordinating our distinguished panelists today. Please. And please welcome Mr. Andrea Ben Company Vietnam office, Ms. Rima, Head of Asia Risk Insight, Mr. Traju, Advisory Partner, PwC, Mr. Phạm Tuấn Anh, Greenfield Vietnam, Ms. Đào Thúy Hà, Chafaco. Please come on stage.
So the floor is ours. So good morning. Good morning. And firstly, I'd like to thank you, OECD, and the organizer for inviting me to be the moderator today. My name is Nguyễn Quang Vinh. I'm the Vice Chairman of Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Chair of the ASEAN BAC Vietnam, and the Chairman of the Vietnam Business Council for Sustainable Development. I'm very pleased to be here today to moderate the first and very important section on sustainable investment in Southeast Asia. I think we have more than 1 hour, 75 minutes to discuss a very important content of the topic. And having you here today. We have the representative from Singapore and from Indonesia and from Vietnam. And especially we have two panelists also are the member of the Vietnam Business Council for Sustainable Development. And you know that, we are on the way to achieve the 17 SDG with 169 indicator, and we are on the halfway. And to achieve that is very, very ambitious goal that the almost all member of the United Nations have adopted in the year 2015. And now we are talking about sustainable development. We are talking about ESG. We are talking about, just energy and clean energy and all the, the business model that lead us to that goal that, circular economy, green transformation, digital transformation, that very important. So investment, sustainable, especially sustainable investment become more and more important. And I think that after hearing the presentation from Vietnam, each of our panelists will have 5 to 7 minutes to answer our question, not my question, but the question of the audience as well. So in order to start with our discussion today, I would like to invite Mr. Andrea Campanoli, the head of the Vietnam office of Bain & Company, to present the recent report that they have developed, the Southeast Asia Green Economy 2023 report. And so that you can see and identify for yourself the key trend of the sustainable investment in Asia. And going along with that, it's that the legal environment and the risks and challenges. So please, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's a real privilege and an honor to be here with such distinguished guests, with fellow panelists, both personally as an individual, as a resident here in Vietnam, and also a representative of Bain & Company, who has as a corporation, very big ambition. We pledged more than $1 billion worth of fees over 10 years to sustainable development. Part of that work results in some of the publications that we do regularly, one of them being the Green Economy Report. It is not simply from us, but with deep collaboration with some really cornerstone institutions here in Southeast Asia, such as, for example, Temasek, who provided some of the insights and data required. What I'll do over the next 10 minutes is share some of the underlying data, part of it, and part of it will also be what we think are the implications, not just policy implications, but also implication for corporations, private companies, and the likes, as we're all here to promote and sustain the transition of the Southeast Asian economies. I think several of the speakers this morning, the chairman of VCCI and other distinguished gentlemen, have mentioned how there is a marked increase in efforts and actions from a number of parties when it comes to the energy transition. Governments have upped their targets, have signed, pledged in light of, obviously, the Paris Accord. Corporates have increased 4 times their SBTI, so science-based target commitments and objectives. And investors, as we heard as well from some of the speakers earlier, investors play a pivotal role, and they're also putting more of their capital to work. So all of this is the glass half full view of the picture. Two things still stand out, though. The first one is in terms of policies. Although most countries made commitments, and again, just as a reminder, here the goal is reducing carbon emissions by around a third for Southeast Asia by 2030. That will enable the region to meet the 1.5 target from the Paris Accord. And again, we need to remember that this is in contrast, not in contrast, but needs to be balanced with the ambition that the region also has of further economic development, the demand from a rising middle class, and so on. So while the goal is clear and some commitments have been made, in reality, those commitments are in the process of, and we wish that process to, via forum like this, to speed up and gain even more momentum, are in the process of being cascaded down. So once you have a commitment, you need a plan. Once you need a plan, you need objectives, then you need KPIs, then you need incentives. And then that trickles actually down to action for both individual and corporates. And while the commitments are clear, the countries in Southeast Asia are at different stages of that journey. The second point that I mentioned earlier was around investment. Again, $5.2 billion were put to work towards green investments in the region. I'll show you some data on how that is split. But unfortunately, that's still a far cry from what we believe is needed to meet the 2030 targets. Over the next 10 years, we believe $1.5 trillion, give or take a few billions, is what is needed, which means a dramatic increase in pace of investments. You see here some of the data, 17 billion invested over the last 3 years, of which a third over the last year. That's actually 10% lower investment level than 2021. We see the sector that continue to provide hope, being solar and wind and renewables in general, and the transport sector starting to make indents into the fray. The bright spot of this is Vietnam, actually, who definitely punched above his weight in terms of investments, given the size of the economy, given where we are in the economic development cycle. You see there with around 1 billion worth of investment in 2022. So then you ask, why? What is holding back capital providers? We have been hearing consistently that it is not actually shortage of capital, but it is indeed a limited set of actionable opportunities as the investors would look at them, typically driven by uncertainty in regulatory environments, constraint in market access that results in returns that are not economical for that capital, even for capital that is earmarked for energy transition or sustainable transition. Don't despair. That was the glass half empty part of the picture. There is obviously a lot that is being done, and I'm sure will continue to be done, and which will materially inflect both the point around translating policies into plan, into real action, and translating the investable capital in actually invested capital for the transition. Specifically for Southeast Asia, again, let me try to put some numbers around the challenge before we jump to the conclusion. In 2019, Southeast Asia generated around 3.9 or 4 gigaton of CO2. That by 2030, driven by all the good things and many of the reasons why we're here, economic development, the rise of the middle class, will grow to around 7.3 gigatons. To meet the Paris Accord, that should go down to around 4, which still means a growth versus today's level, but obviously a 1/3 reduction versus where the emissions would be by 2030. So what can be done? Well, the answer is, good news is the answer is relatively simple, which is if we only focus on nature and energy transition, we can achieve 80% of those reductions. What do I mean by nature? This is protecting to the largest extent and also conserving existing forests. Southeast Asia is the largest carbon sink area after the Amazon globally. So this just gives you a sense of how important that first block there is, not only for us here in the room and here in the region, but globally. And the secondly is energy. Fostering renewables. And again, here, Southeast Asia plays a massive role, both in terms of the demand side, where you have a rising middle class that is upgrading from 2-wheelers to 4-wheelers, and car ownership is going up, and all sorts of modes of transportation, including air and sea, are growing. But also on the supply side, with the countries in Southeast Asia being rich in ores and nickel and all of the materials required for an EV value chain, for example, to flourish. We have examples even here in Vietnam of notable firms like Vingroup and VinFast spearheading this transition. Other levers are smaller, shouldn't be discarded. That includes, for example, carbon offsets. Again, Vietnam, we applaud the country for the ambition to create the carbon offset market by 2027, 2028. We absolutely think that's going in the right direction. So again, the numbers hopefully give a sense of shouldn't be looked at as a daunting challenge, but should be looking at, we know what the challenge is, right? And therefore we can go after it. Some of the speakers noted, rightly so, that there is a lot of innovation in this space, and some of that innovation will help us, reduce those emissions. We couldn't agree more. However, we do want to stay away from the trap of paralysis, waiting for this innovation. And we would actually argue that it's really important to start with the technologies we have today to make an impact. While absolutely the broader ecosystem will continue to push for further innovation, let's use some of the discoveries that we've already made to start putting a dent into those emission numbers that you saw. What are those near-term priorities that we know already today are effective? Improving the grid, both for renewables and for further capacity. I will talk a little bit about that. Coal power plants. There's around 39 active coal power plants in Vietnam and 12 in the makings. That is obviously fundamental to supply to the demand of electricity from a rising middle class, from the manufacturing sector, given all the tailwinds from FDIs. We're not advocating to change that policy. However, adapting new generation coal power plants would already greatly solve some of that emission number that you've seen. While perhaps the transition away from coal is much further down the line, again, we shouldn't wait for the perfect hydrogen-based power plant technology to do that, but let's work with what we have. Promoting energy efficiency, again, especially important in a country where the real estate sector is undergoing and growing by leaps and bounds. And nature-based solution and protection of nature-based assets. Let me actually spend a few minutes on this. And nature-based solutions to us are a great example of the public-private roles and need for that collaboration. And I don't want to overwhelm you with numbers, but let's take a hectare of land in Indonesia or Malaysia. And let's see what is the economic output if you were to have oil palm plantations or rubber versus forest protection. For obviously then offsetting carbon emissions. Now, what this chart makes clear is that unless there is a price of carbon around $10 to $15, it'd be very hard to persuade farmers and landowners to change what they're doing with their hectare of land. What does that mean? That means that from one side, we need to have active and astute policymaking on the price of carbon markets. On the other side, we need to have a agile private sector that can adapt to those policies. And with that, really unlock the nature-based part of the solution. The second thing, I've talked about the grid and renewables. I'm not going to go through so much of the data, but just for you guys, if you have to take a second piece of information away today, there's 200 megawatts of projects today that are in the pipeline in Southeast Asia around renewable. Some are getting permission, some have had permissions, and they're waiting for announcement. This is a great momentum behind this. We do note that countries need to continue to invest in their grid to make sure that those investments are possible. To conclude, what do we do differently on Monday? Again, how do we make a dent into that 7 gigaton of carbon emission? I've talked about not only developing plans, but cascading those down into objectives, KPIs, incentives, and then actions. We've talked about scaling proven solutions instead of necessarily waiting for tomorrow's innovation. We've talked about capital and how it needs a stable and predictable regulatory environment to be able to then be put to use. And finally, and I think fourth is the one that is the most relevant for all the distinguished guests here, there needs to be a deep collaboration across the entire ecosystem, public to private, private to private, public to public. And only with that, you unlock capital, you unlock action, you establish the right regulatory frameworks, and we can really drive to that 30% reduction in emission. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much for very, very full report. And, we remember last year at the OECD ministerial meeting, we tackled the issue of the resilient supply chain because of the lockdown of the COVID-19. And and then one of the key message was, the diversification of the location of the supply chain. And in fact, it is not easy. The diversification, the alternative destination of the sustainable investment, it take time and resources. And that's why, in this meeting today, I think that, from the point of view of ASEAN and the member of ASEAN, we should talk about why we are here today and to explore more solution and the way forward. And, that meet the necessary investment in the future, that meet the need of the future. And now I would like to hear for a comment from you, Mr. Radu. In your view, as the representative of Kadin, what are the latest trends in sustainable investment in ASEAN in general and Indonesia? And what are the historical underlying driver?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me and having me in this session. I think to answer your question about the trend and the drivers, let me start with the drivers first, because the trends, I think Andrea addressed most of the trends already. I mean, that's really what is happening right now. But let's talk about the drivers. I think if you look at the drivers, it actually shows the opportunity itself, both in terms of the demand side as well as on the supply side. From the demand side, what you can see is as countries in ASEAN countries making their commitment, both towards Paris Agreement, SDG, and so on, this is being looked at as a potential opportunity. Now, on top of that, ASEAN has a very large coastal economy. What it means is the risk from climate change is significant. It can eradicate at least 30% of the GDP if you don't handle it, if you don't mitigate it. And that itself is making awareness and therefore driving the potential for investment. Now, I'm not saying the investment is happening. I think the data shown by Andre actually showing negative. But I think these are the drivers that is making, at least people are interested, commitments are being made, right? The real investment is yet to come. And then, for people who live in Indonesia, but in Jakarta, for example, every day, it's very visible, the pollution that we see. The damage that we see from climate-related disaster, for example, this creating awareness and more activism. On top of that, countries have started making regulatory measures, changes, requirement for corporates to have sustainable practices and reporting. And then from the supply side, the availability of nature-based solution that Andrea was mentioning, this is also being looked at as a place where one wants to make an investment. And I think we've seen this, some impact investment in a small size has started happening as well. Now, what's the trend? Some of the trend that I see, at least from Indonesia's perspective, is a green bond issuance. I think the green bond issuance is improving, is going up. And of course, in the current environment, bonds not exactly cheap. But I think in the long term, that's a positive trend. ASEAN also has just issued the second draft of its taxonomy. And that's a new trend. And we hope that by the end of the year or mid next year, the final draft will be there. And that's going to make it easier. And I'll explain later why it's actually important for ASEAN to have this taxonomy. Indonesia now has something called GTEP, Just Energy Transition Partnership. It's a framework. It's still being worked out. I think it's promising, but it also has a lot of requirements. And the idea is for partners to contribute to this fund and will be used to retire the power plant. But of course, one thing that needs to be addressed beyond that is the grid, right? Because Indonesia's grid, it's not exactly ready for renewable. So when you retire all this coal power plant, you bring the renewables, you have to put a new grid, or you go for a smart grid, which means that additional investment on top of those power generation. And finally, the carbon price mechanism, as being said, in Indonesia today, there is a public market for carbon. This has just been launched, I think, 2 weeks ago in the local stock market. so people can start trading on the carbon credit buy and sell. Now let's talk about looking at the trend. I think also we need to talk about what needs to happen. Right? So the first thing is ASEAN needs to realize that we are competing economies basically, right? Similarity of the economies here. But if you compete, when you try to solve this sustainable development issues, I think you'll go nowhere. What we really need is a collaboration, whether it's in attracting investment, green investment, or technology. We need to work as one, and that will require different mindset. That's going to require different agreements and frameworks and cooperations. So basically, what you can look from here is from each according to its ability, to each according to its need. That should be the framework for ASEAN. Some countries have certain abilities, the others have some needs. So it has to be make a collaboration. The second thing is you need to solve the trilemma of energy. Now, what I mean by trilemma of energy is if you look at an energy sustainability, energy affordability, and energy security. It's not only for ASEAN. Even if you look at Germany, for example, when the gas price went up, they went back to coal, right? Which means that energy security and energy affordability are very important. And for the next 2 decades, I would say it's going to drive the decisions when it comes to energy, right? So how you play along these levers, how you gravitate from one another, that's going to be very important. Another thing is, of course, the deficit in governance and institutions to support this. This is still new, right? What we are facing when we come to sustainable development, this is new. And remember, sustainable development is beyond environment, and we're talking about the environment. But there are so many other things. So this is new, and the deficit in governance and the frameworks, the institutional structures, all these things also need to be looked at. Lastly, I think we have different priorities. Each country in ASEAN have different priorities. Focusing everything into this one, so-called environment area is going to sacrifice the availability of fund for other developments. And this is where I think it's another layer of challenge. So yes, the challenges are there, but these are the things. And as Andrea said, this is already known, right? This is not unknown. We know this. Now how we solve it? Solve it, and this is part of what we did as part of the ASEAN leadership this year, as part of ABAP. Right? Our policy recommendation actually talk about collaboration, talk about energy transition as being prominent and important factors to make it happen.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much for your sharing about the key trend, the driver in sustainable investment in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN country. I want to turn the question to Rima. What are the key challenges in the way of the region aim to push more and more sustainable investment, and how can Singapore to promote sustainable investment in domestic and at the regional level? And could you please describe the legal landscape and the opportunity, or maybe the potential risk going along with that?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, very happy to be here, join this excellent panel. Challenges are complex, many and interrelated. I will try to sort of distill down to a few key issues. I think the first thing, which of course a lot of my colleagues have already discussed, is the lack of a comprehensive framework, sustainable investment framework. Now, I would go ahead and say that, the framework that we have today is basically something that it's something that we kind of have emulated from the EU, which is kind of leading uh, this disclosures and the nomenclature around some of the sustainable sort of issues. So the biggest challenge for, I think, our region, Asia and ASEAN, is to adopt a framework that accommodates regional variations and region and on the ground realities. For businesses, sorry, I'm kind of losing.
Hello.
Hello. I think so, yeah. So, a sustainable investment framework includes corporate disclosure standards, includes taxonomies of how to define what is green and what is not green. While the EU template is a useful reference point, but the operational realities in ASEAN and in Asia more broadly are very, very different. Industries, countries, sectors are at different levels of maturity in terms of how ready they are to pivot to, the adopting sustainable investment practices. So while there's a lot of discussion going on, there's sort of high level political will, there's high level dialogue. I think the trickle down to domestic businesses hasn't happened yet. I think domestic businesses across sector, I still perceive this as very expensive compliance regulations coming from the EU, rather than looking at it as an opportunity to pivot to the future green economy and occupying a dominant role in future green supply chains. So I think that would be the fundamental challenge. Secondly, I think in my line of work, what I often see is the lack of a comprehensive understanding of what the local risk environment looks like at the subnational level, at the national level. This we know this in ASEAN. The realities in Indonesia are very, very different from Singapore, very different from Malaysia. So a comprehensive risk assessment framework which informs the kind of investment strategy you need to employ in that in that particular sector or in that particular country is what is missing. What we see is a very boilerplate idea of due diligence, which is kind of a tick box exercise. So risk assessment, which goes beyond the tick box exercise to kind of really see how the policy environment is shaping up, how the regulatory environment is shaping up in a particular country from investors is another very, very crucial sort of issue.
And how do you see the importance of ESG and how Singapore is placed in the process of decision making?
Absolutely. So ESG has now become a catch-all phrase for everything from natural capital to climate adaptation and all of that. So I mean, Singapore has positioned itself as a key hub and wants to be a hub for for carbon trading, for even for nature-based climate solutions trading and those kind of sort of so that's where I think Singapore positions itself. But I think there's also a big backlash happening because again because of the lack of frameworks, the lack of measurable sort of outcomes that sort of the region faces and the challenges that the region faces there.
All right, thank you very much for your sharing about the latest, the challenges and opportunity, and the way that Singapore also promotes sustainable investment in the region. And now I would like to ask Mr. Tuan, the Sustainable Development Director of Greenfield. We have some point we want you to share about how your company, that's a view from the sector, from the company, and how about your view, your company benefit from the sustainable investment in the region. That's the first point. And the second one is how to address the need of the increased food production, and at the same time with the less emission with or the emission reduction goal in the Southeast Asia country. And you can so please tell us how to attract more financial resources and for that for the emission or net zero purposes, and the role of the importance of how to create the awareness to promote complexity building in the sector, in your sector, and in your company. And we have only 5 minutes because we are a little bit behind the schedule. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vinh and YCD to invite me to come here to prevent some point with our company. And further of all, I would like to introduce myself. I come from Greenpeace, Vietnam. So our company is working for in agriculture and food processing. And so we researching and building and apply 3F healthy food chain. So in company we supply fish from animal. We supply animal plating, and also we have food processing, and we supply safety food to customer. Yeah. And okay, for your question, how to I think we Greenpeace we understand that and ensuring sustainability and promoting creation the value as well as harmonizing benefits to stakeholder is the key business imperative to business operating. And so that's in Greenpeace we think that to how to improve the production and reduce the emission is the effort of every country and region, and then it depends on not only industry and then a scale of operation. And in Greenpeace, we have tried to we well aware the fundamental requirement of corporate governance, and we know that the benefits from integrating ESG when we apply, and so we have tried to find apply that in our industry, and from that we have some more opportunity to corporate and then investment from other organization, financial organization. 20 example for 2021, we have invest from IFC, International Finance Organization, and from the investment from IFC, we they invite to us to extend the livestock farming up to AFS, and from that they would like to how to improve the sustainability in our company, and as well as supply healthy food to customer. And from that, based on the cooperation and support, technical support from IFC, we have some step by step. We have some green transformation during operation. Example for some initiative from renewable energy, and then reduce the emission, and promote some model for farming based on animal welfare. Yeah.
So that all about the your experience in attracting the green financing you like, or sustainable financial resources.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So when we have practice in sustainable development strategy, and we have the ESG goal. And working with some other institution, and so we have more opportunity to work with other investor, and in the case of that, we always looking for some opportunity to work with other corporate with them to help to promote the emission reduce reduction. For example, in company, we have a cooperation with some other do some eco project energy service company, and so they have the green investor, and so we cooperate with them to do that project in our company. And so we can have the clean energy for us, and the dual production, but we still keep the production, but less emission also. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tuan Anh, for your sharing. And I think I understand the VVCSF, the Vietnam Corporate Sustainability Forum, which has been organized in August. I think one of the key words and a key takeaway of the forum is that, that's all about the natural positive business. And it's not only the sustainable supply chain, the green financing, and now the businesses should be oriented or guided to the natural positive business. And now I want to ask Ms. Đào Thúy Hà, the Deputy Director of General of Trafaco, what are your key challenges and in the region to further, harness the natural untapped potential, and how to create awareness and to promote also complexity building to drive the sustainability in your company and in the sector.
Tôi rất là vui mừng và rất là cảm ơn đã cho tôi được tham dự vào cái buổi ngày hôm nay để mà nói về câu chuyện là làm thế nào có thể khai thác được cái vốn tự nhiên, nguồn thiên nhiên được tốt hơn. Thì cũng xin chia sẻ với các quý vị, và về Trafaco chúng tôi là một doanh nghiệp mà nằm trong 3 doanh nghiệp sản xuất dược đứng đầu ở Việt Nam. Chúng tôi là một doanh nghiệp trước đây là doanh nghiệp nhà nước đã được cổ phần hóa và hiện nay là niêm yết trên sàn chứng khoán Hồ Chí Minh. 70% doanh thu sản phẩm của Trafaco của chúng tôi đến từ các sản phẩm thuốc sử dụng nguồn dược liệu thiên nhiên và dược liệu nuôi trồng. Do đó là đối với Trafaco chúng tôi thì làm thế nào để tạo ra được, khai thác được nguồn nguyên liệu tự nhiên, khai thác được vốn quý về kinh nghiệm sử dụng các cái thuốc, bài thuốc cổ truyền của cha ông Việt Nam để dùng nó trở thành những cái sản phẩm thuốc hiện đại phục vụ cho nhu cầu người tiêu dùng. Và hơn thế nữa là là đóng góp được vào cái quá trình bảo vệ thiên nhiên, đóng góp vào đa dạng hóa sinh học, thì luôn luôn là một cái câu chuyện trăn trở và trở thành một cái chiến lược mà Chapaco đeo đuổi, đó là chính là chiến lược phát triển bền vững. Và hơn 10 năm trước đây thì chúng tôi cũng đã khởi xướng một dự án gọi là khởi xướng dự án Green Plan. Theo đó thì Chapaco đã tạo ra cái dự án để phát triển các vùng trồng dược liệu qua cái sự kết hợp của 4 nhà nước, nhà khoa học, những người nông dân và Chapaco chúng tôi, 4 bên, để chúng tôi có thể tạo ra được những vùng trồng đảm bảo cho quá trình hoạt động sản xuất ổn định, đồng thời là có được cái nguồn nguyên liệu dược liệu chất lượng cao, đóng góp vào cái sự phát triển bền vững của doanh nghiệp. Nhưng hơn thế nữa thì qua cái dự án này thì chúng tôi cũng thấy được rằng là cùng với những cái thách thức của cái việc phát triển các cái vùng trồng dược liệu, phát triển tự nhiên, thì chúng tôi cũng rất là tự hào là chúng tôi thông qua các dự án thì đã đóng góp được vào cái quá trình đa dạng hóa sinh học, đóng góp vào quá trình bảo tồn tự nhiên. Vì Chapaco chúng tôi thông qua các dự án Green Plan thì chúng tôi kết hợp với các nhà khoa học và đi đến các hộ nông dân để cùng với các hộ nông dân để hướng dẫn hộ nông dân trồng dược liệu theo tiêu chuẩn của Tổ chức Y tế Thế giới. Đây là cái cách trồng ra những cái vùng dược liệu sạch theo tiêu chuẩn. Với cái cách thức này thì các cái vùng dược liệu đã được mọc lên khắp mọi miền đất nước. Chúng tôi cũng đóng góp vào cái việc là xây dựng, tái tạo lại cái bản đồ dược liệu Việt Nam thông qua việc là chúng tôi khảo sát, đánh giá các yếu tố về thổ nhưỡng, về khí hậu để chọn ra các cái cây dược liệu phù hợp với các vùng thổ nhưỡng đó, hình thành cái bản đồ dược liệu Việt Nam. Và thông qua cái hoạt động này thì một cái hoạt động mà chúng tôi cho rằng là rất là quý đối với lại ngành dược chúng tôi là chúng tôi đã góp phần vào bảo tồn các cái gen dược liệu quý và cũng duy trì được cái kinh nghiệm sử dụng các thuốc y học cổ truyền và tạo ra một cái thói quen sử dụng cho người dân Việt Nam trong các thuốc y học cổ truyền. Và cái điểm thứ hai nữa là với cái chiến lược phát triển vùng trồng và dự án Green Plan khởi xướng như thế thì chúng tôi rất là tự hào là đã đóng góp cho cộng đồng, đóng góp để phát triển cộng đồng. Đặc biệt là dự án Green Plan chúng tôi thì lại là có tạo ra được một cái sinh kế phát triển bền vững cho bà con dân tộc. Bởi vì các dự án Green Plan của chúng tôi có những cái vùng trồng ví dụ như cây Artiso tại Sapa. Đây là những vùng trồng được bà con dân tộc Hơ Mông phát triển phối hợp với Chapaco chúng tôi để tạo ra vùng trồng dược liệu sạch để cung cấp dược liệu đầu vào chúng tôi, hoặc có những cái vùng thu hái có bảo tồn như cây chè dây với đồng bào dân tộc Dao, sử dụng kinh nghiệm điều trị đau đường tiêu hóa của bà con dân tộc Dao, thì qua đó thì chúng tôi hướng dẫn được bà con nông dân cách trồng các cái dược liệu sạch, đồng thời nữa là chúng tôi hướng dẫn được cách bảo tồn các cái vùng dược liệu như là cây chè dây khi phải thu hái tự nhiên. Với cái cách thức này thì chúng tôi cũng đóng góp việc thay đổi cái thói quen của bà con nông dân, bà con dân tộc trong việc sử dụng các cái kiến thức khoa học trong việc trồng dược liệu sạch, nhưng từ đó cũng sẽ thay đổi được cái thói quen, tạo ra cái hoạt động tốt hơn trong việc phát triển trồng, phát triển tự nhiên, bảo tồn thiên nhiên. Ví dụ như là đối với cái cây chè dây là một cái cây chúng tôi thu hái tự nhiên có bảo tồn. Do đó là hoạt động hàng năm của Chapaco, ngoài việc ký kết và chi trả cái phần thu hái cái lá dược liệu cao hơn so với các dược liệu khác được thu hái một cách không có kế hoạch, thì chúng tôi cùng với bà con nông dân hướng dẫn bà con nông dân không chỉ chặt cây chè dây để rút cả cái dây đó về thu hoạch lá, mà chúng tôi hướng dẫn bà con cách thu hái và đảm bảo được là cây vẫn còn ở trong rừng. Hơn thế nữa thì hàng năm chúng tôi có những cái hoạt động như là tặng hom giống cho bà con nông dân để bà con nông dân mang lại trong rừng để trồng lại. Thì với cái cách thức như thế thì chúng ta đã thay đổi được thói quen cho bà con nông dân, và quan trọng hơn với cam kết của doanh nghiệp với các đồng bào dân tộc thiểu số thì các đồng bào cũng yên tâm hơn với việc phát triển các cái vùng trồng qua các cam kết ký kết lâu dài. Thì cái cách hoạt động này thì Chapaco cũng phát triển và bà con nông dân cùng phát triển cùng với Chapaco chúng tôi. Đó là những cái điểm mà chúng tôi cho rằng là qua các cái dự án và khi chúng ta tham dự vào cái xây dựng một cái chiến lược, cam kết cái chiến lược phát triển bền vững thông qua cả 3 yếu tố ESG thì sẽ tạo ra một cái cộng đồng cùng nhau phát triển. Nhưng bên cạnh như anh Vinh cũng có hỏi là bên cạnh cùng với câu chuyện phát triển bền vững thì chúng tôi cũng gặp rất nhiều cái khó khăn, trở ngại và cái cách thức. Bởi vì là câu chuyện phát triển bền vững là câu chuyện cần cái sự tham gia của rất nhiều các cái bên liên quan, không vâng, không chỉ có một mình Chabaco mà chúng tôi cần có cả sự ủng hộ của các cơ quan nhà nước, của các cộng đồng, các nhà đầu tư và đặc biệt là người nông dân cũng đi cùng với chúng tôi. Để mà thay đổi được cái thói quen của những cái sự khác biệt như thế, chúng tôi cần có sự thời gian và đặc biệt là ủng hộ của các chính quyền địa phương tham gia vận động bà con nông dân cùng với chúng tôi để thực hiện các hoạt động này. Và bản thân Chabaco cũng phải rất là kiên trì đeo đuổi các hoạt động. Bởi vì khi chúng tôi về hướng dẫn vùng trồng thì bà con nông dân nói rằng là cho chúng tôi cuốc đất hơn là chúng tôi phải ghi chép sổ sách. Thì đó là những cái khó khăn. Hoặc là khi mà làm doanh nghiệp đi đầu về phát triển vùng trồng dược liệu sạch, áp dụng các cái tiêu chuẩn quốc tế, Tổ chức Y tế Thế giới về trồng dược liệu sạch, thì chúng tôi phải đi tìm kiếm các cái mô hình phù hợp nhất tại những cái địa phương để tạo ra những cái vùng trồng tốt hơn. Còn một cái ý là anh Vinh có hỏi là làm thế nào để mà có thể tạo cái nhận thức tốt hơn cho cộng đồng về câu chuyện phát triển bền vững. Thì cũng xin kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu và các bạn bè quốc tế, thì ở Việt Nam thì bản thân chúng tôi Chabaco đã tham gia vào Hội đồng Phát triển Doanh nghiệp Việt Nam mà anh Vinh làm chủ tịch hội đồng cũng rất là lâu rồi, hơn 10 năm chúng tôi tham gia, và chúng tôi thấy rằng hiện nay cộng đồng các doanh nghiệp Việt Nam cái nhận thức về phát triển bền vững đã có cái sự thay đổi rất là lớn trong thời gian gần đây, với việc là khi mà VCCI đưa ra bộ chỉ số CSI hướng dẫn cho các doanh nghiệp để có thể tự đánh giá về hoạt động của mình, thì số lượng các doanh nghiệp tham gia vào giải thưởng phát triển bền vững và áp dụng bộ chỉ số CSI thì ngày càng tăng qua các năm, để có thể thấy rằng là nhận thức của các doanh nghiệp đã tăng lên rất là cao. Và điểm thứ hai nữa là bản thân doanh nghiệp chúng tôi hiện nay cũng đã được các cơ quan nhà nước, chính phủ ủng hộ hơn cho cái câu chuyện phát triển bền vững của mình. Bởi vì khi chúng tôi sử dụng các dược liệu sạch thì nhà nước cũng có các cái chính sách đấu thầu cho cái nhóm dược liệu mà sử dụng các nguồn dược liệu sạch, thì một cái cách giúp cho Chabaco có những cái cơ hội lớn hơn trong việc thúc đẩy các cái sản phẩm tự nhiên đến với lại các bệnh viện, các nhà thuốc. Và một cái điểm nữa thì tôi nghĩ là để mà có thể nhận thức được tốt hơn thì đặc biệt là đối với người dân, đồng thời lại là người tiêu dùng. Người dân là người được hưởng lợi nhất khi mà các hoạt động của doanh nghiệp, của chính phủ cam kết phát triển bền vững, thì người hưởng lợi là người dân. Nhưng đồng thời thì cần cái sự ủng hộ của người dân khi mà người dân có thể ưu tiên các cái hoạt động như là sử dụng các cái sản phẩm liên quan đến phát triển bền vững. Và yếu tố cuối cùng mà tôi cho rằng là yếu tố vô cùng quan trọng giúp cho các cái doanh nghiệp, vì hiện nay thì chúng tôi cũng nhìn thấy rằng là ngoài các doanh nghiệp lớn ở Việt Nam hiện nay, rất nhiều các doanh nghiệp đã có các cái hội đồng phát triển bền vững, rồi các hoạt động cam kết về phát triển bền vững, thì có những cái doanh nghiệp nhỏ, quy mô tài chính chưa tốt, thì họ còn đang đeo đuổi những cái câu chuyện về doanh thu và lợi nhuận và chưa quan tâm đầy đủ. Thì yếu tố các nhà đầu tư, các cơ quan nhà nước thúc đẩy các hoạt động này thì sẽ giúp cho các doanh nghiệp người ta sẽ có thêm, như khi mà các nhà đầu tư có thêm các cái tiêu chí về phát triển bền vững trong cái lựa chọn đầu tư, thì sẽ giúp cho một cái động lực để các cái doanh nghiệp đều phải quan tâm đến yếu tố phát triển bền vững trong cộng đồng.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ha, for sharing your experiences in doing business in Vietnam, collaborating with the government, key stakeholder in society, and forging the inclusive business model of Chapaco over the last year, and also mentioned the corporate sustainability index that we have been working and promoting in Vietnam and in the future in some ASEAN country, so that we can awareness rating, at the same time complexity building for the small and medium enterprises, especially the macro enterprises. So I think that we run out of time, but if you allow me, I want also to give the Q&A section. Want to take one or two questions from the audience, so that we have representative from regional level, Singapore, and also Vietnam, and we have Adra here, have a very experienced in the area of the sustainable investment. So do you have any question or sharing or comment to our panelists, to our speaker or presenter? I think that, the silence, say on that, we have many questions, but we still have a lot of time ahead, during the lunchtime or, coffee break. So on behalf of our panel discussion, I would like to thank you all very much for sharing your key, trend on sustainable development in Southeast Asia country. And we also have some perspective from Singapore, from Indonesia, and from Vietnam. So thank you all. And I wish you all a good health and a very good morning and effective working session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen Quang Vinh and all distinguished speaker very much for your fruitful discussion regarding the trending topic of sustainability nowadays. Now, our conference will take a 15-minute break. Please enjoy the refreshment that we have prepared outside. After the break, please return to the hall for the second discussion, public-private policy dialogue on sustainable investment. Thank you very much.
l'as prononcé. Tu l'as prononcé. Porte depuis que je suis née. Raconte-moi les yeux brisés, mieux que moi. C'est toi, c'est ma de moi, c'est inconnu. Les masques flottant et les enfants de bois. Je ne connais de mon mais vous êtes fiers pour me faire. Porte depuis que je suis née. On te voit les yeux brisés, mieux que moi. C'est toi, c'est ma de moi, c'est inconnu. Les masques flottants et les enfants de bois. Je ne connais de mon Moi, c'est inconnu, les masques flottant et les enfants de bois. Je ne connais de mon vous êtes fiers, vous le faites. Porte de pays que je suis né. On te voit, les yeux brisés, mieux que moi.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's now 11 o'clock. We would like to invite all the delegates back to your seat and for the next part of the session. To our esteemed delegate, we would like to invite you to attend the second session of the Public-Private Policy Dialogue on Sustainable Investment. It is my pleasure to represent to you our moderator of this session, Ms. Sita Rimbel from GIG Vietnam. And now we would like to respectfully invite speaker of the second session, Ms. Chris Brown from Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Ambassador Madeline, the permanent representative of Canada to the OECD, Ms. Olivia Wyden, Head of Corporate Affairs of APEC region, Mr. Vũ Trí Công, Director of Vina Capital Vietnam, Mr. T. Chan Sopek, Advisor of the Council of the Development of Cambodia, to come on stage to participate in the discussion. Thank you.
Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, delegates, and participants. A very warm welcome also from my side to the second part of the morning session, which will be our public-private policy dialogue on sustainable investment, which is organized under the auspices of the OECD Southeast Asia Business Network. My name is Sita Zimpel. I'm the project director for the GIZ, the German Development Corporation, in charge of ASEAN projects on competition, consumer protection, and SME promotion. I'm very happy to act as your moderator for this session and to be joined once again by an esteemed panel of diverse speakers and resource persons from different countries and backgrounds. This public policy dialogue is not the only one that we have organized this year, GIZ, together with OECD and our ASEAN partners. It picks up on an earlier series of discussions we've had on, for example, the participation of small and medium-sized enterprises in the circular economy. And today we would like to sketch a bigger picture on sustainable investment trends, opportunities, but perhaps also obstacles that we are facing both from the side of businesses as well as on the part of policymakers. This is very important to forge a common understanding, to forge ahead together, as we say in ASEAN, to build cooperation and to acknowledge, as was said in the business roundtable this morning, that it's very important to work across sectors and to collectively take proactive measures. This policy dialogue will delve into concrete initiatives, incentives, and instruments. We're happy to share a little bit more, adding to what was discussed earlier. And before we get into our more interactive panel discussion, I would like to ask Mr. Stephen Thompson, the Deputy Head of the Investment Division of OECD, to come to the stage and set the scene for us in a presentation that will look at highlights from the latest OECD ASEAN report on enabling sustainable investment in ASEAN. Mr. Thompson, please take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. When I was asked to make this presentation to explain a recent report that we just published in 2023, I thought I would have to do a bit of work on convincing you of the importance of sustainable investment. But what I saw this morning is, I think you're way ahead of me on that. I think it's a very clear consensus on the importance of sustainable investment. So what I will present very briefly today is a report that we did that looks at how to enable sustainable investment in ASEAN. And our focus is very much, first of all, on investment, but also on what governments can do to enable investment. We don't speak from an investor perspective. We're very much looking at policies to promote sustainable investment. Well, as I said, I don't think we need a definition of sustainable investment. I think we all agree. We know it when we see it. It goes beyond the environmental elements, as was said this morning. It's a just transition, a green transition, and many other areas related to the SDGs. And when in the report, we look at different elements that different ways the government can contribute to to make sure that investment contributes to sustainable development. Well, first of all, they can try to channel investment into certain activities, whether by incentives or by removing any regulatory obstacles in those areas. They can encourage investors, including state-owned enterprises, to act responsibly, to avoid harmful impacts and enhance sustainability. And then they can consider the specific role that foreign investment can play in sustainable investment and try to adopt non-discriminatory policies towards foreign investment. Well, the report builds on 15 years of strong cooperation between the investment division of the OECD and the ASEAN community, both at a country level and at a regional level. We've conducted 12 different investment policy reviews in the region over time. And it responds to ASEAN needs itself. The ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework clearly focuses on sustainable investment, and it makes several references to our own investment policy instruments. And then we discussed this publication in both in the investment policy communities in both the OECD and in ASEAN. So we focus on 4 themes. First of all, how does FDI contribute to sustainable investment? What's the evidence? Second, what sort of reforms and strategies can governments here in the region take to promote sustainable investment? How can they promote responsible business conduct? and how can they promote investment into green that encourages green growth. And we rely on a number of tools at the OECD that are listed at the bottom. Well, the first question is FDI, foreign direct investment, and sustainable development. What is the evidence that foreign investors contribute to sustainable investment, both in ASEAN and elsewhere? Well, there's actually a lot of evidence over time. This is just a summary of some of the main findings worldwide of the impact of foreign investment in a local economy from a sustainability perspective. So foreign investors, obviously, they create jobs, as do domestic investors, but they also tend to be more productive. They pay higher wages. They often offer women greater employment opportunities. They offer more training opportunities than domestic firms. They invest more in research and development. And they're more than twice as likely to incorporate climate change issues in their strategic objective. So there's strong evidence that beyond the capital that foreign investors bring, they bring elements that contribute directly to sustainability. Now, these are averages. We're not saying every foreign investor is going to bring all of these benefits. It's an average across investors, comparing a pool of foreign investors with domestic. But the government can influence these outcomes. It's not just depending on whether the investor is a good investor or not. It's really what is the framework, the policy framework in which the investment is made. That's what makes the difference. Now, if we look at the case from ASEAN, this is based on the World Bank's enterprise surveys. They sample a pool of foreign investors and domestic investors and ask the same sets of questions. And you can see the darker blue dot is foreign investors. So if the blue dot is to the right of the light blue dot, which is domestic, it means that foreign investors contribute more than domestic investors. Foreign investors in ASEAN, they're more likely to introduce a new product or service. They're more likely to offer formal training than domestic firms. They're more likely to have a higher proportion of female employees. And sometimes their CO2 emissions per unit of output, it's a more complex story because some of these investors are investing in heavy industry, of course. So foreign investors might actually be more polluting than domestic investors because of the mix of sectors in which they tend to be found. But I think it tells a very convincing story that foreign investment can contribute to sustainable outcomes in ASEAN and worldwide. Now, what can governments do to influence this? Well, first of all, the region, Southeast Asia, was the leader in attracting foreign investment for export-led development. It's widely acknowledged. All the countries in the world that we work with, they want to know the experience of Southeast Asia, of Vietnam, of Singapore, and so on. So it's recognized. But at the same time, there's still a lot of obstacles in terms of discrimination that foreigners face in the regions. Now, of course, in manufacturing, every country is open to foreign investors in manufacturing, but there are many restrictions in services that affect not only the amount of investment, but the kind of investment that ASEAN might attract from abroad. So this is using our FDI regulatory restrictiveness index. It doesn't make us very popular when we present it, but you'll see that the higher the number, the more restrictive an economy. And you can see that ASEAN average is still much higher than the OECD, but higher than the other countries, non-ASEAN countries as well. Several of ASEAN member states are quite restrictive according to our index. Now, why does this matter? Well, there's several reasons, as I said. First of all, on the left, you can see it shows the higher the score, the more restrictive an economy, and moving out to the right, the more investment relative to GDP that they receive. So you can see it's an inverse relationship. The more restrictive an economy, the less investment they receive. And this is true in ASEAN, but it's true worldwide as well. And then on the right, you see that this affects, it's not just a question of how much FDI you receive. The restrictions tend to be in the services sector. And when we look at the restrictiveness in services, and compare that with overall labor productivity in the economy, you can see that the more restrictive in services, the more that will affect your labor productivity across the economy, not just in the services. Well, the next issue is investment promotion agencies, BOI, BKPM, and so on. How do they promote sustainable investment in their economies? So we surveyed ASEAN IPAs, we surveyed OECD, investment promotion agencies, and asked them this question: how do you promote sustainable investment? How do you verify that there's a sustainable impact from that investment? And you can see we asked them how important the Sustainable Development Goals as a motivating element of your priorities. And in ASEAN, 56% of the IPAs we surveyed said that's the top priority, but in OECD countries, it's a bit less. OECD countries tend to look more at what they're monitoring and evaluation. They tend to base their priorities more on discussions with firms. So the OECD promotion agencies are much more, they have a pragmatic but not very strategic view of investment, if you like. But in ASEAN, there's a much more of an emphasis on sustainability. Now, we also asked them, what are your KPIs, key performance indicators? And how do you select sectors and firms to promote? And you can see on the left, it shows the elements that IPAs look at when they promote investment. And of course, more so than OECD IPAs, they look at exports as well, and digital and gender equality, much more so than OECD investment promotion agencies. But then we asked them, okay, that's how you target firms, but how do you actually measure the impact afterwards? And very few of them actually look beyond just getting a certain investor. Very few of them look at the sustainable impact of that investment. And of course, that takes resources, and IPAs often don't have many resources. But you can see that only 3 of the countries, the IPAs that we surveyed, actually have a sustainability dimension in their monitoring and evaluation. So there's more in terms of promotion. There's still more that investor promotion agencies can do to focus more specifically on sustainable investment. Now, another element is promoting responsible business conduct. We've heard this morning as well the importance of responsible investment. It's obviously investors are expected to behave responsibly, but governments can also do something to enhance, to make it easier, first of all, for investors to act responsibly in their economy. So at the OECD, we define responsible business conduct as ensuring a positive contribution to overall development, while also avoiding and addressing negative impacts. We distinguish it from CSR in a way, because CSR sometimes can be a 2%, 1% CSR tax on companies. It can be an investor building a school or a hospital. This is really integrating, mainstreaming responsibility throughout the supply chain, not just in your own company, but in your suppliers as well. Now, of course, the private sector in this room will be very familiar with these various laws and directives that are coming out of their own country, OECD countries often, the EU, and so on, that are forcing investors to report on what they are doing in terms of due diligence abroad. So this is a very important point for ASEAN members to understand the pressure that foreign investors have in their own market, the reporting pressures that they face at home, and how the host government, how the IPA can help facilitate that sort of investment, given these reporting requirements. Now, of course, ASEAN is not passive in this area. There's a lot that's going on. We know both from the ASEAN CSR network, ABAC, we know about the ASEAN Responsible and Inclusive Business Alliance. ASEAN has guidelines for promoting inclusive business in ASEAN. So this is not an alien concept that is being introduced in Southeast Asia. It's very much part of your own culture here as well. And of course, at a national level, some countries are starting to do national action plans on RBC. Thailand has done one, Vietnam has done one, and others are considering it. But there's still more that could be done in this area, because one element is that companies have a hard time if different, trying to obey the rules and behave responsibly in an area where it differs from country to country about what is really expected of them. So it's very important across ASEAN that there's some harmonization in this area. Of course, ASEAN is a very diverse region. There's Singapore, there's Cambodia and Laos on the other end. So it's not, we couldn't have one system that one size fits all, but more harmonization across the region in terms of RBC could help investors, could create greater certainty for investors. And of course, meaningful stakeholder engagement is always key in this area. Now, I'm not an expert on the green transition. We talked a lot about it today, so I won't say much about this. I'll stop very quickly. But obviously, the growth that ASEAN, the region, has been experiencing has an impact on the environment. There's a rapid urbanization, industrialization, and so on. And we had a very good presentation this morning about this. I don't think I need to repeat it. A lot of countries in the region are very vulnerable to climate change, as you know. But a lot is going on in this region, as we already heard this morning. Now, just my final slide, you can see that fossil fuels still account for most of the FDI, energy FDI in ASEAN. There's some investment in renewables, but it's particularly in Laos, Cambodia, where it's probably hydro, but there could be more investment in renewables if the overall environment is an appropriate one, I think. It's not so much that there's incentive to invest in renewables if there's a difficulty in acquiring land or if the regulations are not clear. So it's very much a question of having the overall environment right, even to get investment in renewables, to expand the renewables sector. And of course, ASEAN is implementing environmental impact assessments. That's quite common in the region now. But there are weaknesses in implementation, as our report says. And finally, ASEAN members all offer incentives to improve the environmental performance of existing firms, to target investment in green R&D or jobs and so on, and also for particular non-green activities. But sometimes these incentives are also offered, they're offered, for example, for non-plastics to remove the use of plastics, but then sometimes the same country offers incentives in other sectors where plastics are widely used. So there's somewhat of a lack of consistency if you really want to achieve sustainable objectives in your incentives. Well, I'll stop there. I tried to be brief. The report is available online. There's a summary here somewhere, and there's a link to it in the agenda. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. It was very insightful and illustrative presentation that I think we can summarize as ASEAN being on a very promising path already. However, more needs to be done. And of course, we have seen some issues with foreign direct investment. At the same time, it's good to also note or take note of the commitment, increasing commitment of investment promotion agencies to prioritize sustainability. With this in mind, I think I would like to turn to our panel very quickly, an introduction of who we have here with us on the stage today by order of appearance, as they say in the movies. To my left, first of all, we have Mr. Chris Barnes. He's Head of Business Development and International Affairs at the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, ACCI. The ACCI is the largest and most representative business organization in Australia, and Chris has considerable experience in the area of international trade and policy, managing a multitude of international partnerships, among others also. Before ACCI, you were the first Consul General in Surabaya, Indonesia. Next, here we have Ambassador Madeleine Jeanette, I hope I pronounced that correctly, permanent representative of Canada to the OECD, also with an extensive track record on working on green issues, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, not just with the OECD, but also previously in leading positions in the private sector, notably at Secor Incorporated and at Accenture. Staying with the ladies, to my right, Ms. Olivia Wyden, Head of Corporate Affairs for the APAC region at Pernod Ricard. More than 15 years of experience here in Southeast Asia, where Ms. Wyden previously also led the British Chambers of Commerce in Singapore and Cambodia, as well as holding the position of Country Director for the UK's Department for International Trade in Cambodia. And then two more gentlemen on our panel here, Mr. Wu Chi Kong, Director or Head and Head of ESG at Vina Capital, a leading investment manager in Vietnam, also among others in charge of the newly established Climate Impact Fund at Vina Capital. And then, of course, last but not least, I'll say the full name once, but only once, Mr. Lor Dikchan Sophia, Mr. Sophia, who is advisor to the Council for the Development of Cambodia, CDC, and has previously worked, among others, with the Japan External Trade Organization under the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry in Cambodia. Welcome to all of our speakers here. Without further ado, I think we can jump right in, and I would like to invite first and foremost Chris, as a representative of the ACCI, devoted to promoting business and investment. What mechanisms, in your view, can be applied to attract sustainable investment? And perhaps you could also shed some light on specific notes or references that would be relevant to our part of the world here, to ASEAN. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I just want to say congratulations to Stephen and the team at the OECD for the report that they've released. I've read it twice in preparation for this, because I think that there's a number of issues in there that we can draw upon. I also want to go back to some of the comments that Rick Johnston from BIAC, the chair of BIAC, mentioned this morning. BIAC provides the voice of the real economy. So I want to emphasize that the title of today's seminar is about public-private partnership. And as Stephen's pointed out, governments enable, but in the end, it's business that actually does the investment. And so the comments that I want to make today are on the basis of supporting business decisions and why they invest. And I just wanted to also bring the perspective of Australia as a foreign direct investor in the region. And I'll draw your attention to a major report that was released in Jakarta a few weeks ago by the Australian Prime Minister. It was written or put together by the former chief executive of Macquarie Bank, which is the largest investment bank in Australia, Nicholas Moore. And the report was around Australia's economic engagement with ASEAN over the next few decades. It's an excellent report, and I recommend that you all read it. But I just want to read one quote from the beginning of that report, because it says, this is from Nicholas Moore: "There are major opportunities for Australian business in meeting the region's major infrastructure investment and green energy transition needs." So already we've identified that there is an alignment of interests here. So this is from a former senior banker identifying that there is a win-win opportunity here in the region for foreign direct investors and ASEAN countries for the green transition. But I also want to just step back a bit and look at the context. So imagine that you are working in the strategy team for a foreign direct investor looking at investment opportunities around the world, and you're doing an environmental scan. And the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry released our National Trade and Investment Survey last week. It was launched by our Trade Minister. And the survey looked at the horizon scan, and it found it's pretty difficult at the moment for investors. We've got high interest rates, we've got persistently high inflation, We've still got disrupted supply chains. Unfortunately, we do have conflict, and we're all grappling with how to deal with the energy transition. So if you're an investor, and Stevens in his report has already identified a number of models and ways of looking at investment, but ultimately, if you're in the private sector, you're only looking at one equation, and that is your risk-return ratio. In the end, that's what you're looking at. And so what this survey looked at was, what are the risks that investors are looking at? What are the potential returns out there? And how does that balance? And what our survey at the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry found was that 71% of our members who operate in the region are looking at diversifying their markets. 60% have identified as one of the major risks, geopolitical risks. But what they also identified was that setting up production and manufacturing facilities in destination markets was the best way of addressing some of these supply chain issues. What that demonstrates to me is that there's a big opportunity for ASEAN. This means that Australian companies are looking at investing in ASEAN in order to address some of those supply chain issues. What we should also look at is, it's not just ASEAN that is looking to engage foreign direct investment in looking at the energy transition. There are other economies around the world that are also doing this. And the competition for global FDI is getting tougher and tougher and tougher. So for those investment promotion agencies that Stephen referred to, their job is getting more and more difficult. So we've got shared objectives. We know that there's an opportunity, but how can we maximize that opportunity? And I've just got a couple of comments I want to make, drawing upon Stephen's work, but also the BIAC paper that has been released today. An excellent report with very serious recommendations. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just want to pick one or two just to highlight where we can have a look at expanding FDI investment here in ASEAN. The first of those, there's got to be a level playing field. Again, Stephen pointed this out in the OECD report, but as someone who has spent 25 years in ASEAN advising foreign direct investment companies on investing in the region, having that level playing field is very, very important. Secondly, I just want to make just a couple of comments on the OECD's M&E guidelines on responsible business conduct. Until recently, I sat on the Governance Advisory Board for the National Contact Point in Australia. And for the past 18 months to 2 years, we've been engaged in the drafting of the new guidelines. And I just want to say, to use this comment from my experience in Indonesia, that the recommendation that's made to ensure and promote the regional alignment of those guidelines, I think we just need to be a little bit careful. It's great that we're raising the bar. That's a good thing. But I think we need to be careful that there are no unintended consequences. And what I mean by that is that when Indonesia was looking at legislating corporate social responsibility, this is back in 2007, the bilateral business councils and the business organizations that represented foreign investors did a stock take of the amount of work that foreign companies were actually doing in Indonesia. And what it showed was that it far exceeded the level that was going to be covered by that legislation. So we need to be careful that there is not an unintended consequence that companies then think, oh, well, you know, I can backslide on this because the bar is not as high as what we're currently doing. That's not what we want. What we want is, in the interest of competition and free trade and investment, we want to make sure that that bar is high, but we want to make sure that it also takes into account local circumstances, which has already been addressed. The second point I want to make on the responsible business conduct guidelines is the importance of stakeholder engagement. And if there's a message that I can deliver today, and that is in the context of having spent 2 years sitting on the Governance Advisory Board in Australia and having gone through the drafting process, I still think there is a lot of work that's a collective we, all of us in both the public and private sectors, can do to promote those guidelines. It's the old adage, when you're sick and tired of talking about it, people are only just starting to listen to it. So I think that if there's one call to action I have for everyone today, it's that we need to do a lot more to be promoting those guidelines. Finally, I just want to share with you that I was visited last week in Canberra by the Vice Chair of the Central Economic Commission in Vietnam, Mr. Nguyen Doi Hung. And I said to him that I was coming here today to make an intervention in this session. And I asked him for advice on what, from his perspective, about what I should say. And he said, Chris, there are 2 things you need to say. First of all, that we need to have foreign direct investment that is sustainable, both in terms of society, but also the environment. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, in the end, Chris, it's all about humans. It must center around human beings. So I thought that was quite a prophetic comment for him to make. But secondly, this is a senior government official has said to me, in the end, these shared objectives that we have, we can't do it on our own. There must be a partnership between government and business. And that's why it's very important for us to continue to work together in order to achieve these shared objectives. I'm going to leave those comments there. Back to you. And thanks again for the opportunity to be with you today. And congratulations again to Stephen and to his team, and also to the BAC team for the papers that they've presented today.
Thank you, Chris, for speaking to the shared interests and objectives of Australia and ASEAN, echoing also, paraphrasing to some extent, ASEAN's vision of not only becoming a competitive region, but also being a people-centered region. I think we can pick up, I saw a couple of heads nodding in the audience. Later on, after we've gone through the introductory statements, we will invite you to, of course, pose any questions that you might want to follow up on with any of the speakers. But before that, we'll complete our round, and I would like to turn to Ambassador Jeanette again. Very often we look to Canada as well as being at the forefront of policy action, reforms that are very forward-looking. And perhaps you could share a little bit of the experiences and lessons from Canada as well when it comes to promoting sustainable investment, and in particular also bringing in, as Chris has noted, the private sector into all of our policy work.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Simbel, and to the summit organizers for inviting me to this session. It's always with profound gratitude to be with those distinguished guests and leaders from the private and public sector here today. And with my background of private, so I am bicéphale, like kind of getting results and at the same time helping as an enabler from our governments. So, so I'll try to share Canada's approach to sustainable investment, but I'll summarize it with a few things that has been said that I want to emphasize. Yes, as Chris mentioned, major opportunities are there for everyone. But in order to capture them, trust is definitely part of the fun. And when we're talking and in the human being, as you just said, like trust is at the core of it, because if we forget it, we will not deliver. We're using the word partnership, and partnership means competing and collaborating. It is not one or the other, but this is a dance that all of us needs to learn. And we need to value diversity. Like the previous panel said, ASEAN is not homogeneous. We all know that, but how to value that diversity and kind of how to make it happen in order to manage the risks that are related to the challenge and the opportunities that are there. So Canada really recognized the importance of quality foreign direct investment in building and sustainable future, both domestically and internationally. When there is an open, inclusive, transparent, and supportive policy environment, FDI support the trade ecosystem, linking firms to global value chains and increasing access to global market. It also supports the skills ecosystem by creating jobs and productivity, as our dear colleagues, Mr. Thompson said from OECD. And by the way, you saw the value of OECD with having all those data and helping compare and learn from each other. To help lead the Canadian financial sectors towards integrating sustainable finance into standing industry practice, Canada launched the Sustainable Finance Action Council. This council, made of both public and private organizations, serves as a center of expertise, partnership, and dialogue on sustainable finance issues in Canada investments internationally. The council works in tandem with Canada Independent Net Zero Advisory Board to champion the implementation of best practices across Canada's financial sector and the broader Canadian economy, and support the growth of a well-functioning, sustainable investment market in Canada. So how does it work with the private sector? Canada works with several private financial institutions to develop frameworks and practices to prioritize sustainable and inclusive investment. And as it was mentioned, like those standards are important in framework, and we need to always to adapt it to our current reality. So recognizing the importance of the private sector plays in shifting investment and capital flows. How do we do that? Like here are some examples. One is regarding clean tech funding. Domestically, one example we have seen unfold with tremendous success, launched in 2018, is our 600 million clean tech fund, which provided funds to 50 companies, including firms, global clean tech 100 companies. For every dollar that we committed, $6 has been raised in additional funding from the private sector by our portfolio companies concurrently or after we invested. That's over 2.7 billion in additional capital supporting Canadian clean tech companies. The next phase is our climate tech fund 2. This 400 million fund will invest in Canadian climate technology firms, demonstrating high potential to grow into global champions and delivering significant domestic and global greenhouse gas. Our 1 billion commitment investment in the energy transition are essential to Canada's net zero path. Another example is the FinDev Canada. So FinDev Canada is Canada's development finance institution supporting the private sector in developing markets to promote sustainable development. Internationally, Canada also has a robust model for public-private partnership, especially in infrastructure projects, which often include sustainable criteria. As part of the financial solutions, FinDev Canada offers investment to partners to integrate sustainable in their core operation. Through Canada's 750 million recapitalization, FinDev Canada applies both a gender and climate action lens throughout the investment process, including on sourcing, due diligence, decision-making, and post-investment support. A third example relates to international development. Canada has also been a leader in testing and expanding the scope of blended finance and international sustainable development, piloting innovative approach that facilitated unconventional partnership. Example, Canada was the anchor investor with the International Finance Corporation, the Inter-American Development Bank, and through the Canadian Climate Fund for Private Sector in Asia, which catalyzed private sector climate investment in developing countries. Canada has always championed reasonable and green investment, and we see immense potential and responsibility in collaborating with our Southeast Asian counterparts to drive sustainable economic growth, which is why we continue to work toward the conclusion of a commercially meaningful ASEAN-Canada Free Trade Agreement and an investment of 24 million for the Canadian Trade Gateway in Southeast Asia. What could be the lessons learned? Well, adapting various policies, initiatives, and partnership to ensure and promote that ESG principles play a significant role in investment decisions. For example, Canada's responsible business conduct strategy provides a framework and tools to assist all Canadian companies to integrate leading responsible business practice into their operation overseas, no matter their size, sector, or scope of activities. RBC is about de-risking our investment activities, integrating the management of risks to the environment, people, and society within the core of business operations. Canada has also put in place various programs to ensure sustainable practices in industries such as energy, mining, and forestry. Regulations might encompass environment assessment, indigenous consultations, and decarbonization considerations. I'm referring to indigenous consultations because it is important to learn from the history, as the previous panel said, when we're talking about the nature and how to deliver on that. Canada's comprehensive approach to responsible business conduct ensures that our business have the tools to constantly evaluate the social and environmental impacts in local markets and ensure their investment decisions are succeeding towards a greener future. Sharing tools, standards, OECD is really a great platform to do that. And building the trust require engaging for long-term with our countries and companies that we're working with. As we navigate the post-pandemic world that is becoming increasingly disruptive, now more than ever, we must ensure our efforts combining resources and expertise, predictable policy environment that focuses on evaluating every country in the region, all on the playing field that is so important to mention. Canada itself as a leader of the green transition. As to global environment, we must also the contribution of FDI shared goals of green growth and decarbonization. Diversity in this region is a strength to leverage. Through collective effort, responsible policies, and strategic collaboration, we can shape an investment climate that benefits us all socially, economically, and environmentally. Thank you, and I look forward to further discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Jeanette. Very impressive facts and figures about how the large-scale commitments Canada has made to channel and champion sustainable investment. And I'm sure the OECD would do a job to compile a little bit these good practices to make them accessible also to others, so we can inspire similar action perhaps here in the ASEAN region. No? And speaking of the ASEAN region, staying with the investor point of view, I would like to turn now to Ms. Wyden and to ask you, what are the ways that foreign companies and investors can support ASEAN member states in realizing their social and environmental objectives, also reconciling, if you will, sustainability with economic goals? Where do you see the role for the private sector? And maybe you share a little bit about your extensive experience having worked.
Thank you, Sita, and an honor to be in today's panel. So Pernod Ricard, as the second leading wine and spirits company globally and also in the ASEAN region, we very much see Southeast Asia as a dynamic part of the world with a lot of growth potential. And this is evidenced by the fact that we as a global company are present in almost all markets in the ASEAN region and employ 50 plus people here. As an company, our core focus is the importation of our global portfolio of 160 plus brands with some local production footprint in some ASEAN markets. Now, when we look at markets, we tend to look at what the conditions are for international trade in order to ensure that they're open and favorable, because we believe that this is a building block to look at future investment decisions in the region and in specific markets. We believe that international trade and open markets can make a significant contribution to accelerate economic, social, and environmental goals in order to support countries in meeting their UN SDGs. There are a number of ways we do that as a private sector. And specifically, I'll provide examples of the international wine and spirit sector and also us as a global company. If we, for example, look at the area of social sustainability in the wine and spirit sector, whilst our industry is not a labor-intensive sector, we do contribute a lot directly in the area of indirect job creation. And that's what we tend to demonstrate. So if we look at ASEAN, where we have the greatest impact on direct job creation is in tourism and hospitality, which is a key driver for the economy in many Southeast Asia countries. A recent study by Oxford Economics showed that in a market like Vietnam, we've supported 650,000 plus jobs downstream in areas such as retail and wholesale, which in Vietnam is majoritively represented by SMEs. Similarly, as a company, we see opportunities in the area of transfer knowledge and upskilling and sharing our experience and expertise to help upgrade domestic production. In a market like Cambodia, we work at the community level where we support local producers of traditional rice spirit by providing them training and capacity building in order for them to improve their production so that they can have a much more consistent, safe, and value-added product that in turn provides income generation and potentially in the future allows them to look at export opportunities. Then it's important that we should also recognize that the fact that inclusive and sustainable growth is actually further facilitated by the fact that most companies today integrate sustainability in their business practices, and they also integrate UN SDGs. For Pernod Ricard, this is no exception, and it's reflected in our 2030 sustainability and responsibility roadmap. We see sustainability commitments and advancing international trade as mutually supportive. Sometimes there is a common misperception that imported goods are more carbon intensive than domestic ones. We've looked and measured our own carbon footprint and actually found that international transportation accounts for less than 10% of our carbon footprint. That said, so keeping that in mind, what we try to do is improve the way we grow and package our products, for example. But we do have a strong commitment to moving towards a circular economy and a circular business model. And just to give you one example again, harnessing innovation and technology, we have worked and partnered with a company called EcoSpirits to create a closed loop distribution system in Singapore for our products that reduces carbon emissions of our transportation partners by 66%. Additionally, we are also piloting glass bottle recycling initiatives in markets like Malaysia and Vietnam to see how we can reduce our waste. Finally, it's important to emphasize, and this has been emphasized by previous speakers in this panel and the one before, that the right conditions are needed to create a fair level playing field to encourage companies to trade, encourage companies to invest in ASEAN. And this really requires us to look at ensuring that the conditions are right for that in the area of policy and regulatory frameworks, but as many other speakers have said, enhanced cooperation between the public and private sector is also key, because there is a role that the private sector can play in contributing and helping countries meet those sustainability and environmental and social goals in general.
Thank you very much. Once again, a very impressive track record of how you took what we just heard about the bird's eye view, basically on how to attract sustainable investment. You took it and showed us a little bit of the concrete impact that is being realized for also small and medium-sized enterprises in countries like Vietnam and Cambodia. And that's very exciting to see. So it's not too abstract for us to also look at this topic from, if you will, a bottom-up perspective. We'll stay with change a little bit the order with Vietnam here, our host. And of course, Vietnam, we saw earlier this morning, is on an exciting path, having just signed on to the Just Energy Transition Partnership. So there's a lot of commitment upcoming to invest into renewable energies, among others. And so I would be excited to hear from you, from your Mr. Vu Chi Kong, from Vietnamese perspective. Where do you see the journey to sustainable investment going in the next couple of years?
Yep. Thank you very much for the question, and thank you very much for allowing me to be here and share my experience. So talking about sustainable investment, I think I would like to start with a quotation that we cannot make it sustainable tomorrow, but we can always make it more and more sustainable day by day. So with that, I mean, Vietnam is a developing countries like Cambodia or Laos or other country in the region, and Indonesia, for example. So we are emerging market, so the momentum for development and the potential is very high. And I totally agree with Chris that the opportunity is all over the place and so many opportunity out there. But how to sustainable investment and FDI, strong and FDI into the countries, I think firstly, as Ambassador Madeline said, a strong and transparent and predictable legal framework is very important for foreign investor and to attract investment into the countries. Because, for example, renewable energy project or carbon reduction project, the potential is high, but how to attract foreign investment, we need very strong and predictable legal framework because the potential is high, but we need to predict what will be the forecast of in the country in the next 5 or 10 years. So that the decision making can be a very good one. And secondly, I think for countries like Vietnam, the awareness and capacity on green and sustainable investment is quite low, I can say. We are at the beginning of the journey. So the government should, and the private sector as well, should focusing on raising awareness and capacity of the local business, of the local companies, so they can deliver a very strong business, managing environmental and social impacts very well, and recording data and sharing data with potential investor and buyer, international buyers, so we can match between investor and the company. So I think the capacity building is very important. Take example for Vina Capital, we've been looking for an ESG manager for like a year now and could not find any good and strong candidate because of the labor market. We cannot find any good and strong candidate on sustainable investment. Saying that, I would like to share that is new, so that's why human resources and capacity building is very important. Yep. And the last one, talking about the potential is high, I would like to share, for example, about the carbon market in Vietnam. We have so many big to carbon reduction and carbon removal project in Vietnam. For example, forestry, we have a large area for forestry development. Mangrove, we have a very long coastline, 3,100 kilometers. So to reach and develop mangrove area that can absorb carbon credit. Also for carbon example, now the greenfield share, the livestock farm at the moment they have huge challenge to do the waste management and wastewater treatment. But if they can build biogas tank and set up electricity generator to transfer biogas to electricity, it could be a very good initiative that company can implement. And there are much more than that. Biochar, for example, we have one of the key sector is agriculture. We can produce biochar from dry husk and put back to the farming activities like a fertilizer. So I mean, the opportunity is all over the place, but how to attract the foreign investment to push that opportunities, we need a very clear and strong and predictable legal framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wu. I think once again, the opportunities are over the place, but of course you emphasize once more the importance of walking hand in hand, public and private sector, in creating a sound regulatory framework that is trustworthy and predictable and would encourage also linkages between foreign direct investment and larger companies with perhaps the smaller and medium-sized enterprises in the different countries. The importance also of seeing that we are at an infant stage here in ASEAN countries when it comes to all of these new green topics, the importance of awareness raising and advocacy, capacity building, for example, with respect to waste to energy efforts. This is a segue for us then to go back or circle back to, again, what are efforts undertaken by different ASEAN governments. And I would like to hand over to Mr. Sophyak to shed some light on the Cambodian context, a country that I think always say is on a promising path of graduating from an LDC, has a new government now in place that seeks to perhaps also take steps to modernize economic reforms and policies. So please do share with us some of your insights of where we stand in Cambodia.
Okay, okay, thank you very much, Sita. And first, I would like to say thank you for the OECD, and also I'm very happy to be here to share about what Cambodia have been doing related to the investment promotion. But I heard one word that in front of the investment is sustainable. The word sustainable, it is another thing that we have to concentrate because of the climate change as well. And I heard a lot about common and also knowledge sharing from our outstanding panelists. I got an I really appreciate and also take this time to share about what Cambodia have been doing. As you know that now Cambodia have the new prime minister that we established. We had the new prime minister in just this year, August, and also not only our prime minister, but also the young, in Cambodia we call it young blood leader among the ministry. I can say that almost all the ministry now we have the young minister, that also we have the 100 days to reform. But the word reform, we have seen our former Prime Minister Hun Sen, but until now the reform still reform, because the word reform is a big change that take a longer time, not just a small change. So let me go straight to the point about Cambodia. When the Cambodian government, new government set up, we have the pentagonal strategy. First one that we have a 5 pentagonal strategy, and one of the 5 we have the pentagon number 4 that we talk about the resilient, sustainable, and inclusive development. And among that also, I just go to short. I don't go to detail. Like one, we optimizing the demographic and dividend and strengthening the demographic resilience and promotion. Second, we about the sustainable management of natural resource, cultural heritages, and tourism. And third, promotion of agriculture and rural development with the strategic objectives. And fourth, strengthening of urban management and modernization. Yeah. And it is under the macroeconomic. But how about the CDC, the Cultural Development of Cambodia, what we do? Because I think maybe some of you know that Cambodia have a new investment law that come into force in the 2001, as I could remember, in 15 October. And then we have the sub-degree that support our new investment law that we just come into force on the 26th June this year, very new. But I think this it is very important, and it is the, how can I say, the tool that we can attract the foreign direct investment, FDI. If we can go to see the foreign direct investment is very important for Cambodia for the economic development. But we think also not only only attract the FDI, but also how that investment also with the sustainability. So we prioritize the priority sector more than 18 sector. Actually, you can see in the law, you will see the 19 sector, but actually only 18 sector. And among 18 sector, we have you can see the sector number 17 is the environmental management and protection and biodiversity conservation and the circular economy. Circular economy, yes, it's green economy. And the 18 is green energy technology contributing to the climate change adaptation and mitigation. And the 19 that I just talked is the other sector and investment activity not listed by the law and investment deemed by the royal government of Cambodia to have potential for social economic development. For this 9th sector is to show that Cambodian government open for the any sector that can contribute to the economic with the sustainability. So I think the 19th sector is the, I think is the clever and smart and open for the any investment to Cambodia that can contribute to the economic and with the sustainability. Cambodian government welcome to invest in Cambodia. That's why I say that attract the FDI investment is one thing, but for the sustainable investment, it's another job and assignment that Cambodian government try to take more effort. It is very important and sensitive word that we have to pay more attention. So, you know, for Cambodia, for the factory, the investor that they come to invest in Cambodia, like the factory, for the garment factory, when they invest in Cambodia, they have the auditor come to audit their company, more than 20 audit. Among them, they also audit about the environment, IEIA, initial environment impact assessment. It is for the, how can I say, the low impact environment company. But for the company that affect to, and it's how can I say, the sensitive for the and big impact for the environment, we have the EIA, that the ministry, that the responsibility of Ministry of Environment come to audit. So all the company investor, they have to comply with the criteria. And for example, like a big and giant brand like the Adidas, you know, like Nike, when they order the factory in Cambodia, they have compliance and ask the company to comply with their requirement, including the environment as well. So now those factories can produce and export to the Nike or produce the Nike and the Adidas. So that means that they comply with the environment already. So it is the commitment of the Cambodian government and also the private sector in Cambodia we are doing now. And the question, so what the Cambodia can support for the sustainable investment? You know, I think maybe all of you know that ASEAN have the target that 35% of installed capacity come from the renewable source by 2025. It means that 2025 they would like to target the renewable energy. But I would like to inform the forum that today the statistic as of the 2022, Cambodia can reach to 62% of the energy that come from the renewable source. So when you see like that, our target in the ASEAN is 2025, but 2022 Cambodia can reach to 62. It's to show that Cambodia government and everybody in Cambodia, we are really respect and focus and prioritize the renewable energy and invest a sustainable investment is very important for Cambodia. So beside that, Cambodia also stop constructing coal power plant except project approval by 2019. And also stop constructing the hydropower plant on the mainstream of the Mekong River. And also try to increase as much as possible the energy production coming from renewable source while the maintain grid stability. So it means that not only 62% that Cambodia can reach for the to generate the energy come from the how can I say, the renewable source, but we government of Cambodia try to do more, to reach more by solar energy. and also by hydro energy as well. So it is a thing that I would like to show, I would like to emphasize, I would like to tell the forum that Cambodia, even though we are the small country, but we have a big heart who are trade the FDI with the sustainability, in environment, and also the worker health. So please, I hope that from OECD, we will have another project that we can work together. We will compete with the work, but we don't compete with our cooperation partner, strategic partner, like we don't compete with Vietnam, we don't compete with Thailand, but we work together. Factory can set up an office in the factory in Vietnam and Thai, but when they don't have enough sufficient or they need support, they can have the Thai +1 or Vietnam +1 can set up a factory in Cambodia and export back. But we all have to respect to the sustainable investment, not promote investment, but promote sustainable investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sophia. Once again, also highlighting sustainable investment is a top priority also for Cambodia, more on the horizon thanks to the new investment law. And again, also a call for collaboration amongst ASEAN member states, because the untapped potential is not just with the foreign direct investment that comes from outside of the region, but also is very much untapped within the region. We're a little bit over time, but we also started, I think, slightly delayed. So I would like to open the floor now to any of you who would like to pose a question to our panelists. Is there anyone who would like to? Yes, you raise your hand. I don't know if somebody comes with the microphone to, yeah. And please do state to whom you would like to address your question.
Hello. Thanks. My question, I think, is to Chris and also perhaps to other panelists. Chris, you spoke a little bit about level playing field, and that idea did get tossed around in the panel. Having covered this region for over a decade, I see there's as a big policy imperative for governments in ASEAN is to rise up the industrial value chain, move away from an export-based economy, drive investments in the mid and downstream sectors. So the policy tools that are available to these governments can range from, production-linked incentives to some very controversial things like strategic export bans. Now, to the outside world, this could look like protectionism. This does look like protectionism. So how do we? What are your ideas in terms of how to balance these priorities, domestic priorities of diversifying their sort of economic basket, and also sort of have an open, liberal sort of market for foreign investments?
Okay, perhaps we take one more question and see if we can also cluster if there's anybody. Otherwise, anybody else would like to ask a question? Yes, sir. I think the microphone is still over there.
I'm not sure it's completely related, but there's been a lot of talk in this panel and the last about importance of regulatory coherence, about the idea of making sure that ASEAN finds its own way around that. The challenge with that is that it's easy to say and hard to do, because you've got to be quite precise about what regulation, what coherence, what does that mean? And there are some experiences around the world where we've done that successfully. Australia and New Zealand has a very good process for doing that. I'm interested in any thoughts that the panel might have about how you might go about doing that, because you might use ASEAN for that, you might use the ASEAN back for that, you might use the OECD as an advisor. It's unclear to me about how you'd get to the detail of making that accountable. So any ideas will be welcome.
It's a tough nut to crack, as they say. I think, of course, when you are speaking about regulatory coherence across Australia and New Zealand is an entirely different picture. No? When we look at the heterogeneity of ASEAN member states, it's very difficult. I don't know if any of the speakers would like to think about this a little bit while I hand the microphone to Chris first to talk about the other tough nut to crack, which is the protectionist sentiment.
I mean, I'm going to refer again to Stephen's report, because I think he's identified that for some economies in ASEAN, there are large parts of the economy that are not open to foreign investors. And so particularly some of those sectors that perhaps need some innovation and some assistance to transition to the new green economy. So yes, I think that there are some economies in ASEAN that perhaps need to go back and have a look at their investment frameworks and see whether there are parts of the economy that perhaps they should loosen up some of those foreign direct investment restrictions. The other point that I'd make is that not all companies use inward investment agencies, actually. They have strategy teams, they have consultants that sit down and scan the horizon. And not all companies actually look at incentives. Not all foreign direct investment is actually incentive driven. They're looking at a return. So I think that we need to be just a little bit more sophisticated in looking at what motivates very large companies from making those investment decisions. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, you want to add to this, or you have the microphone?
Maybe just briefly building on from what Chris said is, I don't think they need to be mutually exclusive. And I think where international companies or foreign direct investment has a role to play is, as I said in my intervention, in areas like transfer knowledge and investment at large. So I think where there are current restrictions and barriers in certain sectors, open them up and look at a model of cooperation. And I think that's been the key message, because I think an overall restrictive environment just creates an overall disincentivization for anything from trade to investment. And I think, you know, with that in mind, and as Chris said, it doesn't always have to be about incentivization, but it's also about, as many of us said, those regulatory frameworks and the right policies, because oftentimes as businesses, we just want to go to countries where there is an ease of doing business. It doesn't necessarily have to be an incentive to do business.
And speaking of regulatory frameworks, would you like to speak to the other question on how to make them more coherent?
I will be very humble here because I don't think I have the solution, but I'd like to share some thought about these tough questions. And I'm going to use Canada as an example. Like Canada is a big country. We have many provinces, 10 provinces. Some are small, some are big. And therefore, when OECD is always repeating in our economic review that we need to minimize our specific regulations from one province to the next because it avoids growth. So we know it is very hard because everyone wants to keep their thing. But what we have learned, not only in Canada, but knowing that Canada is one of the countries who has the most free trade agreements with many countries, is that we need to look in a dialogue with having the private sector and the public sector at the table. That's why I shared many examples, because you're right, it's the private sectors who are condemned to do all those regulations in order to, and it is very costly. So they all want to kind of get into many countries without having that cost increase. So by having them at the table, and that's why the dialogue, and you said it, Chris, like the private sector doesn't talk the same way as the public sector. That's why I was saying bicephal, because I've been doing a lot of translation over the last years in order to say, how do we better work together, private and public? But also the public sector needs to learn from the private sector more and more, because many private sectors company in many sectors have done the compete and collaboration at the same time. And this is exactly what we need to learn in the governments is we're not only doing bilateral deals with one country to the next, we are doing an ecosystem deals more and more. And of course, we need to learn how to do that. But having the private sector at the table from the start and making sure that all the ecosystem, as ASEAN is one big one, had the table at the same time, say, how do we need to evolve in order to ease the life? But it is through ongoing dialogue and the pressure that the private sector brings to the government to accelerate like softening the regulations sometimes, but also kind of agreeing. And that's why those standards that OECD is bringing to the table is very important, because it helps everyone to get an agreement of what needs to be done, but then how to adapt and to kind of what is the transition is the key thing. So it won't happen overnight, but it could be happening in a couple of years in order to make it happen. And what is very positive in the discussion today is everyone seems to agree that we need to meet those sustainable goals, that the RBC is important. So how to help each other is the key points, and we'll make it happen. I'm quite convinced because, again, everyone wants to have that economic growth that is important for all our citizens.
Thank you. Again, I think we would now close our panel for now, but of course you have the lunch time or the lunch break as well to engage and interact with the other participants, the speakers you've heard of. Mr. Thompson is also still with us in case you would like to ask more about what the OECD is doing. A lot of ground that we have covered in today's discussion, but of course we only basically scratched the surface, and there's still a lot that we would need to look at in order to inspire both government and private sector action when it comes to sustainable investment. And this event today hopefully has also, in the same way that it has benefited me in getting a better awareness about different perspectives, also been useful to you. We hope that it has been one small stepping stone in raising mutual understanding between the public and private sector, with a view to making sure that, of course, future policy actions are firmly anchored in the practical realities of businesses, and also emerging policy requirements that we would have are duly complied with by the companies on the ground. And we have examples like those shared earlier today that would bring on others to join in the call for sustainability. And with this, I would like to close our event. I would like to thank OECD at Business, OECD, and of course, our host, the Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry, VCCI, for organizing this fruitful discussion, this public-private policy dialogue. And I wish you all a good day and a wonderful lunch. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate the sharing of our panelists. And last but not least, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to all the speakers, delegates, and esteemed guests who have actually participated in the program today and sharing initiative, practical information with audience. We believe that the best information and will contribute to the promotions of the sustainable investment in the region. And we want to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, Business at OECD, Asian Business Advisory Council, VCCI, for organizing this important event. And now we would love to invite our devoted speaker and beloved delegate to come to the stage for a family photo, please. Thank you very much. May we wish all the delegates good health and success. Thank you.
Mở doanh nghiệp